Okay, I guess we might be recording now. Yes, we're recording, and I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so today is October 8th, and that would be this day, and we are doing arrays, and so I'm going to probably get all the way up to jagged arrays today, and then we'll take a look at this assignment. This is the assignment for today, extra exercise 8-1. So the first thing I'm going to do is download the exercises. All right, so I mean PowerPoint slides for chapter 8. And I'm going to save them down here. Okay, and the other thing I'm going to do is when we do our exercise, we're going to go back to resources and we're going to download, click here, and we're going to click here, and we're going to download this score calculator with array. But I think I'll wait until we actually get to the point where we do that, in case people are watching this video and they want to just go right to the where I start doing the exercise, and they'll see how it starts up from scratch. So let's start by checking out these slides. So we are going to do, we're covering chapter 8 today, and I might try to get up to like maybe slide 30 or so halfway through. And so objectives are, given the specifications for an application that requires the use of one-dimensional rectangular or jagged array, write the code that works with the array. So we're going to learn how to do that. Given the specifications for an application that requires the use of one of the collection classes presented in this chapter, write the code that works for that collection, okay? And for knowledge, we're going to learn how to distinguish between a for loop and a for each loop. We're going to be able to explain the array class and how it is used with the array, a bunch of nice methods in there. Don't even have to learn how to sort anymore. We just call a method. Distinguish between an untyped and a typed collection class, the null conditional operator, and differences between collection classes list, sorted list, queue, stack, and array list. Different methods, different operations. When you insert stuff into a queue and then you take stuff out of a queue, it's different than when you insert stuff into a stack and take stuff out of the stack, as you probably know. Okay, so there's one-dimensional arrays, there's two-dimensional arrays, and there's jagged arrays. And then after that, we're going to learn about lists. Okay, so one-dimensional array is the simplest array. You probably remember this from 128. And the syntax for creating a one-dimensional array is like this. You first declare the array. It's going to be of some type, like decimal or integer or string, and then it's got a name. So this is how you refer to it, how you reference it, and so this actually this is how we assign how's this array length, array name. First we declare, well anyway, I usually do it this way. Type, we say the type, and by having these little bracket things, we're saying it's an array, and then we give it a name. And then we have to say that it is a new object of this type. Okay, it seems kind of redundant, but that's just how you do it in C#. It's kind of that way in Java too. So examples that create an array of decimal types. Okay, so in this case, we use these two statements like we do up here. First we declare an array. First we declare the type of our array along with a name. It's going to be, the name is going to be totals, and it's going to be a decimal array. And this is how we actually allocate the space for it. So this actually, you know, sort of creates the space for it. This first part just says what kind of type it is. It's going to be a decimal. It's going to be an array. It's going to be called totals. And this next line here says there's going to be 4 positions in this array. There's going to be 4 decimal values in this array. And this is how you do that in just one statement. Okay, so that's decimal types. We can do strings. This is how you might do an array of strings. You say you're going to create an array called description, and it's going to hold string types. And in this statement here, we're declaring a new one, and it's going to have 3 positions. It's going to be able to store 3 different strings: string 0, string 1, and description 0, description 1, and description 2. Those would be the 3 strings. So the default values, depending on this, it has default values. It can be dangerous when you have default values, but these do. But when you're declaring some sort of numeric array, like an integer or decimal or whatever, the default values in the arrays are going to be 0. If you are declaring a character array, the default value is a null character. If it's a Boolean array, the default value is false. If it's a date time, it's going to be this. And if it is a reference type, which we'll learn about later, it's null. So syntax for referring to an element of an array. Well, you just do it this way. You say the array name, and then you say the index, which is the numbers, so starting with 0, usually 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's which one you are referring to, and it's going to have a value. So it can be on the right side of it can be within an expression on the right side of a assignment statement. Here, for example, we are declaring an array. It's a decimal array, and we're naming it totals, and it can store up to 4 different values: total 0, total 1, total 2, and total 3. And so here, the next 4 statements after that, we're assigning values to those 4 elements. And this last one here would be an error because you've only declared 4 spots here, and here you're trying to write something into a fifth spot, which there is none. So it would throw an exception. We remember about exceptions from last chapter. So here's a code that assigns objects to an array of strings. We declare an array of strings called names. It's a string array, and there's room for 3 of them, and here's 3 names. There's other ways where we can create arrays. We can create them, and we can initialize them all in the same statement. For example, in this one here, we are declaring an array. It's a decimal array, so that means it holds decimal values. The name of the array is totals, and in fact, it has 4 decimal values. This array named totals has 4 decimal values: 0, 1, 2, and 3. And lo and behold, we're actually assigning values here. The total 0 is going to be 14.95. Totals 1 is going to be 12.95. Totals 2 is going to be 11.95. And totals 3 is going to be 9.95. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is we can just do it directly this way. So you don't even have to do this new decimal for stuff, you can just do it this way. Here's what, an example of we're doing it that way, and we are assigning these string values to this names array. Here's an example of where you have given it enough information for it to make some assumptions about your array. So in this case, you aren't really saying it's an integer array, but it would be initialized as an integer array because these are integer values. So there is a length property for arrays, and the length property returns the number of elements in the array. So in this case, okay, well, this code computes the average of an array totals. Okay, so let's say you've got this array called totals, and it's got 4 elements in it. It's got these 4 element values. So what you can do to figure out what the average is you can add them up, and then you divide by the number that there are, which is 4, and then you get this number called average, and that's what it is. So this is code. This code here, you know, I guess the point here for this one is that you could actually use the length property. Instead of putting a 4 there, you could put totals.length, and that is going to be equal to 4. Here is a code that puts the numbers 0 through 9 into an array. So we've declared an array called numbers. It can hold 10 of them. It's integer array. And this is a for loop which goes from 0 to 9, the length of the array, which is 10 here, and so 0 to 9, and it assigns the value for I, assigns that to the actual array. Here's some code, and we're going to use this code like this in our assignment for today, where it creates a string. It creates one big long string called number string. And this number string has got all the numbers in it, followed by a space. So there's a number there, and then it adds a space to it. So when you display out this message box, it's going to look like this. So here's a for loop that computes the average of the totals array. So it loops. It does the same kind of thing as this thing, except for this uses the length property. So it goes from 0 to however many elements there are, and each time it adds the value to this sum, where it's totaling it up. And then here we divide sum by the totals.length, and we get the average. So that's a way of using this .length property. Here's code that displays the totals array, and we're going to be doing this. This is just like what we're going to be doing for our assignment, where first we declare a string here called total string. It's empty, and then we loop for the length of the array. We loop that many times. Each time we add it to this toString. We concatenate. We concatenate it on, and then we also concatenate a new line character, which is why each score is on its own line. And then here we display it all out. First we display this title line, followed by a new line. Then we display out the string, which has a bunch of new lines in it, and then there's a new line. Then it displays the sum, and then it displays the average. The syntax of a for each loop is a little bit different. For each element in the array, it loops, and it assigns the value to a variable here that's declared, and we're going to call it element type, or no, call it element name, and it's of a type. It should be the same type as the elements of the array. And so in a case like this, this total array has got these values in it, like maybe these values. This value, this value, this value, this value. And so when we're doing something like this, we're going to go through, and this is a loop, and the first time the loop goes through, this total variable here is going to have the first value of the array, and that can be summed in, and then it goes loop again, and then it'll have the second one, then it'll have the third one, then it'll have the fourth one. Each time we're summing it to this sum variable, and so then we divide by the length of the array, which is the number of elements in the array, and then we get our average. Here's the same code which displays the numbers array, except for it's using a for each. See, so for each, it just goes through one by one, and for each of the elements, it assigns it to this scalar variable here called number, and that's how you refer to it, you see. So you don't have to use superscripts. You don't have to use left square bracket and then an index and then a right square bracket. You just do it this way. Code that displays the totals array. So here's the same code except for using for each. Same thing. Okay, there's a rectangular array is simply an array of arrays. It's a version of an array of arrays, and you can think of a singly dimensioned array as a column of numbers, and you can think of a rectangular array as having rows and columns. So you have two subscripts. There's the row and the column. That's just the convention is the row count, column count, and different languages have different conventions. It can be sometimes column count, row count, and most of the time it doesn't matter. But so here when you declare a variable, a rectangular array, the first one is the row count, the second one is a column count. So if it's got like 3 rows and 2 columns, it looks like this: 3 rows, 2 columns. It's got, let's say it's an array of names, and the first column is the first name, and the second column is the last name, and 3 rows, which means it can hold 3 names. Okay. So here's an example of a 4x4 array. This is row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3. And this is column 0, column 1, column 2, and column 3. Row, column. And this is some code that you might use to assign values to these. You can think of each one of these as one element. And this is just a visual way of this is just a visual way of this is just a way of visualizing how many elements there are and where they are with respect to each other, like which ones are next to each other, row-wise or column-wise. But really, what we have here is 16 elements. This is an array with 16 slots in it. It's just it's organized 4x4. And here's a 3x2 array where we have 3 rows, 2 columns. This is one way of initializing it. We can use these curly braces again. We can initialize it this way. This is using the curly braces. And it's doing row 1, row 2, and row 3. And this array has got the first column is some sort of code, And the second column is the description or the title of the book. So this is a code for the book, the title for the book, code, title. So each row has got a code and a title, and there are 3 of them. So you can declare an array of strings this way, or you can declare it this way. And so, we can use the get length method to get the number of rows or columns in a rectangular array. To get the number of rows, you specify the 0 dimension index. And to get the columns, you specify the 1 as the argument. So if you have this 2-dimensional array, this rectangular array called numbers, and it's got rows and columns, you want to find out the number of rows, you do it this way. You say numbers.getLength parentheses, or 0 in parentheses, and to get the number of columns, you use this getLength method with a parameter of 1. So that's different than a singly dimensioned array that's got, well, like this has got this is a property. This is just a property, how many elements in the array. Whereas this here, okay, here we're talking methods. These are methods. All right, so code that displays a numbers array. So we have a nested for loop. The inside loop displays all of the elements in a particular row. The outer for loop goes 1 row at a time. So the outer for loop, if there's 5 rows, the outer for loop is going to loop 5 times. And if there's 20 columns, the inner loop is going to loop 20 times. So the total number of this most inner loop, the inner loop here, most inner loop is going to execute, rows times columns number of times. Okay, so just remember, the inner loop iterates across the columns, and the outer loop iterates across the rows. So here here's displaying those books again. The inner loop is going to display, the code, and then 2 tab characters, and then the actual title, and it's also going to put 2 tab characters after here too. I notice it does that. There's another kind of 2-dimensional array where the number of columns is different or can be different for each row. In a regular rectangular array, the number of columns is the same for all the rows. For a jagged array, each row can have a different number of columns. So a jagged array really is like an array of arrays, whereas a rectangular array kind of isn't. It's because a jagged array, each row is its own separate array that can be any length, and independent of the length of other rows. So here's how you might declare a jagged array. It's numbers, and there's the first thing you declare is the number of rows, and then you can go through, and with each row you've got this numbers array. It's got 3 rows: row 0, row 1, row 2, and row 0 is going to have 3 elements, and row 1 is going to have 4 elements, and row 2 is only going to have 2 elements or columns. And so when you refer to element in a jagged array, you do it this way. You put square brackets around the row and then square brackets around the column. It's different than a rectangular array where you just have one left square bracket and a right square bracket and then a comma that separates the row and the column. But in a jagged array, you actually have left square bracket, right square bracket enclosing the row, and then left square bracket and right square bracket enclosing the column. So here's an example of we are assigning row 0, we're assigning values 1, 2, and 3 to column 0, column 1, column 2. And then for row 1, this is kind of a weird way of looking at it because each one of these columns is actually assigning values to that row. This first column assigns values to the first row. The second column assigns values to the second row. The third column assigns values to the third row, as you can see. This is how, if you want to do it all in one statement with curly braces like that, this is how you would do it for a jagged array. And here are other ways of creating and assigning values to jagged arrays. And here's code for displaying out jagged arrays. The inner loop is going to display out all the columns for that particular row, and it's going to vary. You get the length of a row by using the dot length property. You get the number of rows by using the get length method. So for jagged arrays and for rectangular arrays, you get the number of rows using the get length of 0 method. But for a rectangular array, to get the number of columns, it's going to be the same number of columns for each row. You use the get method of 1 method. Get length of 1 method. And for the length of a singly dimensioned array, you use the dot length property. And to get the length of a particular row in a jagged array, you use the dot length property. Here's one that displays some titles, separating each one by a bar. Okay, and here's some common properties and methods of the array class. These you know about length. You can get the length. You can also get the upper bound. This is for a jagged array. You want to know the highest number of, wait a minute, what is this? Index, oh, the index, oh, this is the index of the last element of the specified dimension of the array. And then you can copy arrays, you can do binary search on an array, and you can sort an array. So anyway, this is far enough for today. We're halfway through almost. Let's take a look at the, I'm going to set this aside because I might be copying some code. Let me put that over here. And I'm going to go to our resources and look at the, let's look at the assignment. Assignment 12. Do this, that, and the other thing. Go to exercise 8-1 described here. 8-1 is this one. Okay. Okay, so in this exercise, you will enhance the score calculator form of exercise 4-2, so it saves the scores with the user enters in the array, and then lets the user list them out at the end. So exercise 4-2 did not have this display scores button. It only had add and clear. But this one has display scores. And the reason is it has that because as you enter in the scores, it stores them in an array. And then you're able to click on display scores and it displays them out again. Okay, so so that's what we're going to do. So we're actually going to start. They give us the 4-2. They give us a completed 4-2. And with data validation and exception handling added. So even that is in there. So this is a pretty easy assignment. All you got to do is go in and declare a class variable for an array that can hold up to 20 scores. And then we're going to modify the click event handler for the add button so it adds the score that's entered by the user into the next element in the array. And we're going to use a score count variable to refer to that element. And then we're going to move the clear scores button as shown above. And then we're going to modify the click event handler for this button so it removes any scores that have been added to the array. Oh yeah, the clear is going to work, so it clears the array also. The easiest way to do this is to create a new array and assign it to the array variable. Okay, then we're going to add a display scores. Yeah, so add not only does what it did before, but it also adds it to the array. Clear does what it did before, but it also clears out the array. And display scores is new and displays, it sorts the scores in the array. Oh, look at that. It sorts the scores in the array. Isn't that nice? Okay, so we're going to use the sort method. And displays the scores in a dialog box and moves the focus to the score text box. Be sure that only the elements that contain scores are displayed. Be sure to, okay, so I guess you're able to click, I don't know. Really? I know. Because the array is going to be 20 elements, but you might not have 20 scores. So you don't display the empty ones. All right, so to do this, we can go to our Laulims, click on Resources, click on ITS148 Exercises, click on Chapter 8, click on Score Calculator with Array.zip, click on it, download it, and I'm going to put it on the desktop. And there it is. Right click, extract all, double click, Visual Studio 2019. Okay. It's not making me log in. Huh. Well, anyway, let's run this, see what happens. I've got to sign in. Well, let me sign in here quick. Sign in. So here we are. We can add 100. Excuse me. 110. 120. And average of 110. Yeah, that's right. Clear scores. Exit. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let me, I'll look. Excuse me. My mother told me never to blow my nose at the dinner table. But she passed away a long time ago, so. All right, so let me, all right, so now I'm gonna stop this. Oh, it stopped already. Okay, let me bring this back. Oh, let me, I'm gonna move this over here. Put this here. And where's that assignment? I can see some assignments. Here we go. Let me break this off. Put that over there. Put this down here. Can I put this somehow like right there or something? Okay, so we want to declare a class variable for an array that can hold up to 20 scores. Okay, so I'm going to go over to over here, and I'm going to view some code. Let me double click on this thing, and let me right click and do view code. So here's some code, and look, here's the int total and the count total, and I'm going to add int left bracket, right bracket, scores array equals new int 20. Okay, there, I did that one. Next, modify the click event handler for the add button so it adds the score that's entered by the user to the next element in the array. Okay. To do that, you can use a score count variable to refer to the element. So I'm going to use this as the array reference. And so let me go down to where we are adding stuff. Add button. Here we go. Wait a second. There's no data validation in here. This just doesn't have the data validation in it. Doesn't have the data validation. Well, let's find the one with the data validation. Let's see. I'm gonna go and find. All right, let me put that down here. Let me get rid of this thing. Close this. I'll save. I'm gonna just. I'm gonna open up this another browser here. Laulima. Richard. And let me see if I got something here. 148 resources. Do I have some kind of solutions or something around here? Let me see. Exercises. Four. Wait a second. This is not. Am I in the right? I'm not in the right place, am I? Exercises, exercises, exercises. Oh well. So I'm going to do it on this one, and you can watch this, and you can watch this, and figure out how to do. I will track down the starting file, the starting project, and you will have to enhance the correct starting project. But I'm going to enhance this one because the fact that it doesn't have the validation and all that kind of stuff doesn't really matter too much for what we're doing with this exercise. So I'm going to start this back up again. And here I am, and I guess none of that stuff got saved. So let me just put that back in here. Let me put int array int called scores array, and that's going to equal a new int 20 elements. Okay, and then I'm here's adding. And this thing converts it to a value, adds it to total, increments it. I also want to add it to this array. So scores array, and I'm going to use the count as the reference is score. Okay, so that stores it into this scores array. What else? Let me. There we go. All right, so I did that. Modify the click event handler so it adds a score. That's great. To do that, you do this. See, I did that. Move the clear scores button. Okay, where is it? Move the clear. So it's got to look like. What's going on? Why is it doing that? Why is my code freaking out like this? Something's not right. My program is going nuts. Oh no. Okay, well, I'm going to have to. All right, I'm going to have to close this video and start over again. I got to restart the computer. So I will. So just hold on. I'm going to restart my computer and be right back.
Okay.
All right, we are back, and we are trying to do exercise 8-1. And so I've opened up this 4-2, which is a scoring calculator program. And if we look and see what it looks like, we see that it doesn't look quite like this. It looks like this. It does not have, you'll notice that it does not have the display scores button. But you can add, 90, 95, oops, 95, 100, and we end up with an average of 95, 3 scores, and so on. So that's how this works. And what we're going to do now is modify it so it stores the scores. It stores the scores, and we're able to display them out afterwards. So first of all, we're going to now one problem is you know, you can, is that one off? You can turn it back on again. So the first thing, okay, so in this project we opened up does not have the data validation and the exception handling. I'm going to find that file and put it up for you so you can start with that if you want to. But I'm going to start here by doing this declare a class variable for an array that can hold up to 20 scores. Do you want to try to turn that back on again? There's a button in front. There's an on-off switch. But it's one of them is the button. Turn it on. Oh, this is right here. Okay, so to do that, let's do int scores array is equal to a new integer array that has 20 up to 20 elements. And then I'm going to modify the click handler for the add button so it adds the score to the array. Okay, this is the click handler, click event handler. Let's go back. If we double click the add button, we get to this click event handler, and right here, let's add this to the array. So let's go scores array, and we're going to use count as the index equals score. So this takes the score that we just got in, sticks it into the count is going to start out at 0, so it's going to put in the 0th one, and then it's going to increment count by 1, get ready for the next one, and so on. All right, so I've done that. Now, next I'm going to move the clear scores button so it looks like this. What does this look like? I want to display scores, clear scores. Okay, so I'm gonna put this up here, and I'm gonna add another button. Right here, and I'm gonna call that one the text is going to say display scores. And the name is going to be called BTN display scores. All right. I did that. Modify the click event handler for this button so it removes any scores that have been added to the array. The easiest way to do this is to create a new array and assign a value to it. Okay, so I need to make it so this clear scores button, I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to make it so this thing clears the array. So the way they suggest to do that is just to do this. Scores array equals, in other words, just reinitialize it. Okay, that just reinitializes it to 0. Add a display scores button that sorts the array and then displays the scores. Okay, so now we're talking about the display button. So I'm going to double click on that, and now we have a brand new event handler here precisely for this display scores button. And so I'm going to write a little event handler here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort this array. Array sort parentheses scores array. It's that simple. Now I've sorted the array, and I'm going to initialize this string that I'm going to display out. Score string equals nothing. And then I'm going to use for each. For each integer I, for each of these score values, and I'm going to call it score value. Entered score. Entered. For each entered score in scores array, do this. If entered score is not equal to 0, so I'm not counting zeros, I guess. So if somebody gets a 0, they're not even going to get counted. If it's not equal to 0, then scores string append onto scores string this entered score dot to string. And then I want to add a little line feed character to that, so it skips to the next line. And then when I'm all done with this, and I'm done with that, I go down here and I can do a message box show scores string, and the title, it can be sorted scores. And then when I'm all done displaying out the scores, I want to put the focus back to this text score. I want to put the focus back to this thing right there. So after I display this, it's going to display it out of the message, and then it's going to put the focus back here so I can start adding stuff again. That's what this last thing does. All right. All right, let's see if this works. Score 50, 60, 70, oops, 70, 80. Okay, so that's 4 scores. Average is 65. Let's see what happens when I display. Ooh, 50, 60, 70, 80. Is that all I do? Do I do anything else? Oh, I guess that's all I got to do. Okay. All right, well, that looks pretty good. And then when I clear the scores and I display, nothing. All right, it works. Okay, so that's how you do exercise 8-1. I better start making these exercises just a little bit more difficult for you guys, because I'm ending up doing them all for you. But anyway, I'm going to find the other file, and you can start with that because I wanted to make sure that it's got all this other stuff in there. All right, are there any questions? Are there any questions?
Nope.
Yes. Rain, are you saying something?
No, I don't have any questions. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Okay. How about you, Mr. Gillum? Questions?
No questions at this point.
All right. So I guess I will sign off here, and we will see you on Thursday. Thanks for watching.